Hello, my name is Stephanie Chambers, and I'm a graduate student at Liberty University. This is my end of semester project for Interpersonal Communications, HSCO 508. To tell you a little bit about myself, I am married with one child, and I'm an investigator, criminal defense investigator for the Mecklenburg County Public Defender's Office. Going through my project, just to give you a little background, when I go to the next screen, I'll just simply say, next slide. So I'm going to go to the next slide. What is interpersonal communication? Interpersonal communication is defined as the type of or kind of communication that happens when the people involved talk and listen in the ways that maximize the present of the personal. Next slide. Exhaling and inhaling. Now, when you think of exhaling and inhaling, you think of breathing. When you think of inhaling, you think of taking things in, and exhaling, sending things out. And that's exactly what Stewart did. Stewart reveals that communicators are always talking and listening, as well as sending and receiving information. He uses exhaling and inhaling as metaphors of communication. Next slide. Inhaling. Inhaling is an interpretive process of perceiving and listening. Exhaling is the output or sending of communication. Now, next slide. Thinking about a goal, my overarching goal. Over the semester, we did a lot of readings about interpersonal communication, and I came to realize that I'm not the great communicator that I thought I was. So after obtaining so much knowledge about interpersonal communication, I realized that I'm not a great communicator or a great listener that I thought I was. Therefore, my ultimate goal is to become a better communicator and to be a more attentive listener. Next slide. In the book, Bridges Not Walls, a book about interpersonal communication, which is the book that we read throughout this semester, the author revealed that there is a direct correlation between the quality of life and the quality of communication. In order to enlarge my conversation, I have to be inclined to work on my communication problem. Now, just a little background and behavior blends. What are behavioral blends? Behavioral blends are a combination of 4 different temperaments that individuals display. Next slide. DISC. So let's talk about DISC. By understanding these 4 quadrant models of basic human behavior, one can discern the way people act. These 4 temperate model of human behavior is known as DISC, and each temperate style represents specific behavior patterns. Next slide. What is DISC? D, active task oriented. I, active people oriented. S, people oriented. And C, task oriented. Next slide. Now, throughout this course, we took an assessment called Uniquely You. This assessment will reveal your different personality traits. So my Uniquely You assessment revealed that on graph 1, this is expected of me, I displayed an S-type personality. In graph 2, this is me, I displayed a CIS personality. Next slide. I'm going to talk about these traits. S-type traits. Some of the traits are the following. People think or expect you to be more sensitive and more submissive. They often feel inadequate or unworthy. S-types have a vision and passion for helping others. They also, people see them as steady and stable. They are quiet and reserved, but they do make great listeners. So I have the personality according to this Uniquely You, but I just need to put this into play. Now let's look at the CIS traits. Next slide. Traits for CIS personality: emotions go up and down, strong people skills, outgoing and reserved, prefer peace and harmony, and feelings of inadequacy and can impress a crowd by the way they speak, look, and act. Now, a lot of these traits I didn't really agree with that describe me, but some of them I did. Let's go to the next slide and talk about the influences of these traits. Now, the positive influence is being a good listener, which is what I'm striving to be, a better listener. A negative influence is feeling inadequate, and feeling inadequate could prevent you from self-disclosing. And if you don't self-disclose yourself, that could be a communication barrier. In order to build a relationship with others, you have to be able to disclose yourself to them. So let's talk about communication barriers. Next slide. What are communication barriers? Communication barriers are items that could prevent or distort communications within an organization. This organization could be family, home, or work. It doesn't matter. Any organization that communication is going to take place. So what are my personal communication barriers? Next slide. Hearing what I want to hear. Biased listening. I tend to be engulfed in only conversations that I found interesting or that are beneficial to me. Interrupter. Oftentimes I interrupt when I want to get my point across instead of hearing what the other person has to say. A faker. Oftentimes I pretend to be listening or I appear to be listening when I'm really not listening. So what am I going to do with this? Plans of action. Next slide. So in order to enlarge my conversation, what do I need to do? I need to improve these listening and communicating skills. So what are some ways to improve? Well, Burley Allen mentioned in his book that there are ideal characteristics to being a good listener. Examples: listening for new ideas everywhere and integrating what I'm listening to what I already know. Another, being aware and listening with my total being. Another, maintaining conscious perspective on what is occurring rather than remain unconscious and missing very important details. One that I find interesting, focus my attention on the talker's ideas while listening and feeling. Next slide. Take initiative. Work at listening. Focus my attention on ideas. And some goals that I need to set that Peterson revealed in his book is, as a listener, I need to provide safety, understanding, and clarity without agreeing, disagreeing, advising, or defending. And as a talker, I need to share thoughts and feelings without accusing, judging, labeling, or attacking. So all of this ties into a verse that I found to be that really resonated with what I was saying about listening. Next slide. Proverbs 18:13 states, "If one gives an answer before he hears, it is folly and shame." And that's what you have to remember. Before you give an answer, what do you have to do? You have to listen. You have to listen. And thank you for listening to me.